it's not worth the ramifications. Like, you're not on talking terms. So like, you got to weigh it up.
You went through a breakup, not with your romantic partner, but with a business partner.
Like, if I had my time back, would I go into business with the best mate now? No way. The other person does like a different venture. The person who's doing that different venture hopes that the business flops. Like, I was so angry, especially with things getting made up, like rage and fire. Just talking about that makes my skin crawl. Oh, I'm the CEO and you're the COO. Then when it comes to a split, and a really messy and public split at that, you start going, well, hang on, like a lot of our earnings are going to lawyers. And like, it kind of kills me as a startup, but it's like, no, this stuff's really important. I think if you're in the mindset of not trying to get that quick cash grab or that like overnight success kind of thing, like I'm in this for 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 years.
Yeah. My question for you is, knowing what you know now, I feel like you're a little bit older, a little bit wiser. Would you do it again?
Oh.
Louis, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Kyle.
This is going back a little bit now, but you went through a breakup, not with your romantic partner, but with a business partner. And it's something that I've always tossed within my head of like this idea of, first of all, having a business partner. Like it's something that even I'm having to consider now. But doing it with a friend. My question for you is, knowing what you know now, I feel like you're a little bit older, a little bit wiser. Would you do it again?
Oh, like if I had my time back, yeah, I would. Like if I was sent back to that time, like I wouldn't change it for the world. I've learned so much from going to business with a business partner, going to business with the best mate. Would I go into business with the best mate now? No way. Not a chance. It's not worth the ramifications. Like, there's, generally speaking, from everyone I've spoken to who have ended relationships with like a best mate who's also been a business partner, you're not on talking terms. So like, you got to weigh it up. Now I'm thinking about, right now my best mate, Jesse, like I would never, there's no amount of money in the world that I would trade to lose him. But in terms of what I learnt when I did 9 to 5 fitness and when I was, working alongside Gab, I wouldn't change that for the world. Like, I'd learnt so much, which I apply to my business now. So, sorry, it's not a black and white question. It's not a black and white answer, but yes and no.
Why do you think you mentioned something really interesting, which is like business partners and anyone who hasn't necessarily, or, when they have, had an exit or kind of gone separate ways, a lot of the people aren't on talking terms. Like, why do you think that is?
It's an interesting one. I think often because there's a reason you've split up. Like, you're not working because you think the other person's either not doing enough work or you think the other person's like crazy. So either way, like, you end quite pissed off. And I think what happens as well is like someone often retains the business and keeps going with it. The other person does like a different venture. The person who's doing that different venture hopes that the business flops. The one who's still with the business hopes the new venture flops. So it's like, naturally, it's a pretty toxic environment to continue something. But I think after a bit of water under the bridge, at least in my experience, like, went through a lot publicly as well in my like split up from 9 to 5 fitness. And I remember, being in the weeds of that and the thick of that and really thinking like, I will actively like never utter this person's name again. Like, I was so angry, especially with things getting made up, like I'd like rage and fire. But over time, like water under a bridge, you forget about the bad things, you remember the good things. And I think, it's easy to kind of slip back into that kind of mindset of like, oh, like, could do it again.
You guys were quite young as well when you first started it. So I'm assuming that, like, I could imagine if I had started a business with a friend at such a young age that, like, if I was doing it now, everything would be by the book. There would have been, contracts day one. Like, I don't know if you guys went through that or not, but
No, we didn't.
I know that's. But I definitely wouldn't have done the same thing if I was, starting a business with a mate that young as well. So it's interesting that you say that. Like, I've interviewed Steph Claire Smith and Laura Henshaw on this podcast, and we actually had a really interesting conversation around their experience going through that. You know, this idea that when they kind of were taking their app to this next level, they were like, oh, like who's going to be the CEO? You know, like, oh, and like they both said, oh, we need to hire a CEO. And it was interesting that what eventuated was that, you know, some of the internal team had said, well, no, Laura, we really think you should. And then Laura, her first kind of response was like, oh no, but like, what about Steph and like all this stuff? And you know, Steph's pretty laid back, so she was like, man, Laura, you're perfect for it, blah 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 blah. But it is interesting like that, because I feel like when you're in a business, like when you're a startup and you're a small business, there really is no such thing as a CEO. Like everybody's just fucking doing everything.
Oh man,
it's like, you know, there's not even roles in the beginning. Like you're just like, cool, you're handling this for the next week, you're doing this, and then you eventually get to a point where you find out strengths and you kind of start to merge into these roles. And then once you start building team and so on, but like it is interesting that like I think at some point when you have two business partners that and the business gets to a certain point and you start bringing on team and so on, like how easy it could be to like get that wrong or not, or that communication isn't there, or like someone's lagging off, or they're, you know, keeping everyone focused and these kind of things. I think it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
And you can see how it can go ugly.
It's funny, like just talking about that makes my skin crawl. Like it takes me back to a time of like, oh, I'm the CEO and you're the COO. It's like, well, hang on, straight away, that's a, you know, division of power. And like, just going through that whole process, like, yeah, probably wouldn't go into business with a mate again. And, you know, like, as you said, like now when you set up a company or a business, which I've done in Interval, mate, we have had lawyers from the start, like from before it was even a thought. We've had lawyers involved. We've got contracts right up until the brim. And those contracts don't matter until they do matter. And I went through exactly that. Like, as you said, is very kind of young and starting a business, starting a company, which was great and, you know, wouldn't change it for the world. But then when it comes to a split and a really messy and public split at that, you start going, well, hang on, like, I remember you said that I'd get the podcasting equipment. No, fuck you. It's not in the contract. You're like, well, what? Like, I swear, hang on, it's in this email. I'll find it. No, find the email. Find the email and then you can have it. It's like, oh, you know, and I think for anyone who's, for 99% of people who go into business, that's not going to happen.
But what you said is like literally the truth. It doesn't matter until it does. And I think a lot of people take that mindset going in is like, oh, you know, like that'll never happen to me, or I'll never go through that problem. And it's, I've had it with clients, you know, before, like where, you know, in previous businesses where you start to realize that the higher and the bigger the client that you work with, or the more serious of a business. And what I mean by that is like, you know, you're talking hundreds of millions in market cap. Like, you know, it is like you're jumping over fences continuously of like, they make you and want to test you with these kind of things, like, and put things in place where they completely negate any risk. But it is something that, you know, even myself, when I started my first business pretty young too. Like, you just don't think about this stuff. You don't think it's ever going to happen to you. But in reality, you just realize that these things happen and people are so biased to their own situation. And mate, it is a dog eat dog world out there. Like people will do anything they can to save themselves a buck, to make sure that they don't take any risks, to make sure that they're not at any, there's no expense to them. Yeah. So it's definitely something that, you know, even myself now, we take it very seriously in anything that we do. But what you said is very true. And to anyone who's starting a business, get this stuff sorted. It's actually worth the spend.
It's funny, like when I was starting my new venture, Interval, I was talking to a really well-known like venture capitalist, and he said first thing is get lawyers. Like set us up. He introduced me to lawyers, and from the get-go, like we've had, and it's like that's how important it is, because, you know, let's say one day what we do requires VC, like that's all set up, like that cuts out half of the headache for when we're ready for that.
And what people don't realize is it actually costs you more the bigger the business gets. So like, you know, getting it set up from the start, like if let's say you're a startup and you grow to what, 2, 3 million, 4 million, right? And at that point you want to then go and do all this stuff. At that point, you've got a lot of IP. There's, you know, even just like people don't realize that if you bring in a partner or you need to transfer the ownership of any shares and you're a $5 million business, those shares are now worth a certain amount of money. So to transfer them, you know, there's fees associated with it. There's actually costs involved. But even just what you said, like the bigger the business gets, the more it actually costs, especially with lawyers, and they're not cheap, mate.
Mate, lawyers are our biggest at Interval. Lawyers are our biggest cost.
Yeah, 100%.
Like our monthly, it's a lot of our earnings are going to lawyers, and like it kind of kills me as a startup. Like it kills me because I just want to feed everything back into the marketing, into the app, into the building behind it. But it's like, no, this stuff's really important, and I think if you're in the mindset of not trying to get that quick cash grab or that like overnight success kind of thing. Like I'm in this for 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 years.
Yeah.
Then it's like, well, let's just start basic foundations to have enough people on the app to be paying rent and like be paying for the app. And then, you know, whatever happens from there, we'll see. But yeah, if it was a quick cash grab and if we were trying to grow it to a point that it's just, you know, like biggest in the universe, I'd say fuck the lawyers and let's get into it.
What's been the biggest difference for you then in your mindset, obviously building a new venture compared to, say, the previous venture that you're in, right? Like, I feel like whenever you go through cycles, I feel like I often think of them in like 5-year cycles, and you're probably coming up to, you probably feel a lot more like, okay, I know what I'm doing. You're planning a little bit more. Like, what's been the biggest difference for you building your second venture? And like, how are you feeling, you know, mentally and just, you know, even with what you understand?
I think firstly, my frontal cortex has grown and I feel that. And I feel that wholeheartedly. Like, I'll go to do things and then I just won't do them because they'll be stupid. I'll go to reply to a hate comment on social media that's to me with like trying to tear someone's life apart because they've said something mean, and then I won't.
Yeah.
Whereas back in the day, I 100% would have done that. But in terms of like, from a business perspective, I think a lot of like trusting my intuition and trusting my gut, it's a huge one, and something I probably didn't do, especially having a business partner. It's so easy to just like kind of forget about that and think like, just like offload it to someone else. So that's been a huge part of it. I think this second time around is like where I'm all about being as professional as possible. Like I want to offer a service and a tool that is elite, and what needs to go into that to make that happen. That's the first thing. Second thing is like I have an acute understanding of my skills and my abilities, and they are not in email marketing. They are not in app development. They are purely marketing, pretty much. And, you know, showing what the app can do. So with that in mind, like I can delegate so well, and we have delegated. So I've got the best team around me, and I'm forfeiting equity. I'm forfeiting, you know, cash to have the best team around me. So I think prior in my first 5-year cycle of business, I would have said, no, I'll do everything myself, and all of it would have been done at 20%. Whereas now everything's getting done at 100%, but I have to forfeit a little bit for that. So that's been my biggest kind of change, I'd say.
Yeah, interesting. Run me through the equity mindset thing there, right? So like it's a really interesting conversation around a startup, especially in the world that you're in, like moving into the app space. It's, you know, it's not a cheap space to play in when you're trying to develop something great. So can you run me through your mindset with equity and potentially the process that you went through there and what that looked like a little bit? Yeah,
I mean, anyone who's done a startup knows like everyone wants equity, which is a great sign because that means people believe in you.
Yeah.
Like I have had so many people ask for equity and ask for more equity. Which is like a really nice feeling because obviously like, well, hang on, they believe. Like they're happy to forfeit time and money in order for equity in my company. Well, that's a great sign. But in terms of like, we've managed to keep it really, like I'm by far the main, you know, equity holder. We've managed to keep it really lean, which is great. And it's been a tough one to do. But the mindset is just like keeping costs down. You know, the app wise, so Jordan is my a good mate of mine, but business partner first. We live together. So he's a housemate. And he's an app developer. So he kind of came to me with this idea of the app, and we figured out like the best way to go about it. Obviously, I don't need to go into specifics, but he's got equity, but also pretty much everything I do from social media wise is involved with Interval. So he's not just like building an app and then getting equity for that. Like he's building an app and he's getting access to like pretty much my whole network. So that's kind of the sales point, I suppose, from me to him. And then from there, we've been able to keep it real lean. There's one other equity holder, has a pretty small amount, and I've recognised his skills as something we're going to have to pay a lot of money for going forward, and something we will need access to forever in the process of Interval. So that's the reason we got him on. So it's essentially 3 of us as equity holders.
Run me through the conversations around equity, not from a details perspective, but more like how much equity is too much, right? And how do you navigate those situations? Because I find you're right. If someone wants equity and if they're a valuable resource, it's a really good thing, because what it means is they believe in you, they believe in the product, they want in. But the other side of that is, mate, there's a deal's a deal, right? And the deal's got to be a win-win for both parties, and you've got to eventually agree upon that deal. So how did you navigate situations? Because I'm sure the 2 partners that you had weren't the only conversations that you had around equity, right? So run me through the conversations around like how much equity is too much, and how do you kind of, as a founder of a startup, how do you know internally, and then, you know, from like, what was your process of going, no, this doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
This isn't the right fit.
So first thing was like being aware of the skill that they're going to bring to the business. So like if it's a skill like marketing, let's say, there's billions of marketers around the world. My mum's a world-class marketer and I have access to her. So straight away, it's like, man, I would love to give you so much equity. And it's like, that's literally the conversation. Like, honestly, I'd want nothing more, but it would just be a stupid decision. And that conversation I often start with, I want to give you more. I can't. And then also the reason I can't is because this isn't a side hustle for me. This is my life. My balls are genuinely on the line. If this doesn't work out, I'm, back home with mum and dad. So I can't, I wish it was as easy as just throw a bit of equity here, throw a bit there, and we all just hold hands and we're happy families. It's so not the case. Like, this shit matters. So that's often like kind of how the conversation goes. And generally they understand. But in terms of finding like the right people, yeah, it's all on skill for me. So like, what are they going to bring to the business, not just this year, but in 10 years time? And how bought in are they?
100%. And it's, I often think of it like, how much leverage is there in this skill to what I'm actually trying to build? Like you mentioned marketing, like what I think of, especially in the early days, or when if maybe your first business, or you're kind of new to you kind of don't think of equity as such a big thing. But when you understand that like you're trying to build something that is going to be your life's work, it is going to be, somewhat of a big business, and that's what you're striving for. You're not valuing the equity on what it is currently. You're valuing the equity on what it is in the future. Because like what a lot of people don't realize is you don't start a business to have a wage.
No.
Like 150 grand, 200 grand, 300 grand, even 500 grand. Like that's not why you start a business. You start a business because you might have a wage for working within the business within a specific role, but it's what that business can generate as profit. And that's where the equity value stands. So $20 million business at a, let's just say a 10% EBITDA margin, right? You're looking at $2 million a year in EBITDA that, can potentially be distributed at a particular time, which, that's on top of a wage. That's like, and there's values to those shares. Like those shares are now worth something.
Yeah.
Because, if the business can generate $2 million in profit every year over a 10-year period, that's, $20 million.
Yeah. You're laughing.
Right. So like, that's what equity. That's what someone's. That's what equity is.
And that's where
providing.
you look at it from. Like that's at the start. You're going, look, I believe. Like, and every founder does. If you want a positive outlook on the life, talk to a small tech founder startup.
Yeah.
Startup founder. Like they're just gonna. They think it's roses and everyone.
Blind optimism.
Yeah, blind optimism. But I think as well, in that conversation for the equity thing is like making sure that they are bought into the business and like understanding, like we can't afford to just be continuously taking cash out of the company early on. And that's been a big chat amongst like me and my team, and everyone agrees with it and is on board with it. But it's like, I would love nothing more than to pay everyone X amount. And we can do that, but just know, like, we won't make it. Like, give it 2 years and we're done. So unless you're kind of willing, now people need to be remunerated for their skill and their time and their efforts within reason. Like, if you're going to come on board, like, and get equity in this company, unless you're willing to forfeit a lot of like time, effort, and money, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And like, even something that I've found is like actually doing the numbers on it.
Yeah.
Like running the numbers as to like, okay, this is like what's a 5-year projection based on what we're currently at? What's that equity actually providing someone in terms of ROI value? Like I feel like a lot of people that come from that aren't a founder, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Like, this isn't a dig, but it's a lot of people that haven't started a business before. They kind of can come in at times and want everything. Like, I want a $200,000 wage or $300,000 wage, and I want, 30% of the business. And you're like, well, like, mate, we're not, we're like like our run rate's this.
Hope you're doing a lot. If you're getting that.
like this doesn't actually marry up. And a lot of people come in and say, well, that's what I'm worth, right?
Yeah.
Or so on. But it's not necessarily how it should be looked at. And I think that's another really key lesson as to why founders need to actually stand their ground and need to really understand the internal value of the company, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are we actually trying to do? Be really clear on the vision, but like, getting that is one of the hardest things, especially when you start to have conversations with people that maybe bring a really valuable set of skills, because that's when it's difficult. Like, it's easy to have the conversation with the skill that's not necessarily super valuable. Get someone come to you who's asking for a lot, who's super valuable. Now that's a really difficult conversation, because you've got to be ready to walk away if the deal's not right.
Yeah.
So I find that the reason that's why my ears pricked up when you said the word equity, because I'm like, I understand those conversations and they can be very difficult at times.
Oh, mate.
And there's a lot of gonads on the line.
Yeah, there is. And it's like, and my mum.
You can lock horns, mate.
Yeah.
You can just lock horns.
Mum's always said, a problem never ages well, or, like a bad, like an issue never ages well. And it's so true. Like, I'd be putting off to have this call with someone to tell them they're not getting equity, essentially. And then it's like, I'm just kicking the can down the road, just avoiding. I'm like, nah, all right, I've got to do this before I go on a date with like Izzy, my girlfriend. Otherwise, I'm just going to be thinking about it the whole time.
And she'll cop it.
Yeah, and she'll cop it. And I'd be like wanting to talk to her about it the whole time. And she's like, I don't fucking care. Like, so I just remember, pacing around my room, like putting the AirPods in, like, here we go, come on. Like, I've got to have the chat, and then doing it. And then it always works out. Like, it is what it is, if there's a few tears and apologies. But yeah, it's a real tough one. And it's something like what you were saying before about the skill that it brings, and like the type of person a founder is. And, I was talking to mates lots in like consulting and stuff in that world, that KPMG, all those ones. And like explaining to them like that I'd be the main shareholder despite the fact I didn't build the app was like, they could not they're like, what? Like, you've done nothing. You just sit there like a, jockey on a horse. So,
but that, you know what? That's what those guys don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, they don't understand that, like, we're going to get into this eventually, but like, I think we're moving, like, okay, let's put a scenario in place, right? I reckon in 3 weeks, you'll probably be able to develop, you'll have some AI co-pilot who will be able to sit with, say, someone like yourself who's got one developer there, and you guys will probably be able to build something really substantial, whereas 5-10 years ago, you needed a massive team to do it,
Yeah.
right? Like, you know, I don't know if you've seen it, Devon, the AI co-pilot, like you
No, I
literally
haven't. Yeah.
prompt it and it now develops stuff for you. So
Awesome.
you still need a developer because the developer is the one who
It's your own ship.
I
Yeah.
can't read code, you know, you can't read code, so
No.
you don't know what it's doing. But like this thing is pretty crazy. It's pretty wild. But it literally can develop for you. It can run a test for you. It can review your code, debug it, all of it, right? So that's not valuable anymore.
No.
The value is in brand and brand IP, right? And that's what you bring to the party. You bring this built-in distribution, right? So, you know, the rules of business is whoever can spend the most on acquiring a customer is the best possible business. While like Facebook is probably one of the greatest businesses ever, right? Because, you know, their gross margin, you know, they're spending 10% of their, not even, probably 5 to 10% of their revenue on developing the product. They got a minimum 90%, you know,
Profit,
or
yeah.
not even like you could probably say they can like, let's take the rule of, let's be modest and say 10% they spend on developing the product. That means to have a business that generates 30% profit, which is a pretty good business. You know, tech businesses will be a bit more, but let's say 30% net profit. You know, they can spend 60% of their revenue acquiring customers.
Yeah. It's a dream.
Which is crazy,
How
right?
good. Yeah.
So like, but that's what I think people don't understand about creator-led businesses and why they are the, like, you know, the Logan Pauls, the Mr. Beast, the Kimmy K's, like these really big names are building businesses faster than we've ever seen them built before. And they're bringing in partners and they're partnering with people who can operate or like you're saying, build the product, mate. Like, it's because you've got built-in distribution.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Absolutely.
So, you know, you don't have to spend money on marketing or not as much. So it's almost we're flipping the script a little bit. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, no, it is. It's cool to see, and it's like funny just talking to different people along the way. You know, they're like here nor there, like so confused by it all. Like, wait, what do you do? What do you do? And it's like I'll do my skill, the team will do their skill, and things work really well.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Like what you said is like, you know, the kind of the old school businesses, the PwCs and these guys, they don't necessarily understand this world. They obviously understand equity and structure and finance really well, right? Like they're masters at it. But we're in a bit of a different world now, especially in the startup space. I feel like obviously there's still these big legacy companies, but the startup space is very different. There's a lot of creator-led businesses now. There's a lot of, you know, I mentioned a few before, but like the reason that, like, if you think about AI and what it does, it, you know, it does a lot of the heavy lifting and a lot of the technical work. This is the thing that I think people probably miscalculated a little bit, is like technical work is now are the first things in this world that are being taken over.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like
Lawyers.
like
build contracts.
all
Yeah.
these technical skills. that
Shareholder
previously-
agreements. AI will do it in, you don't need to spend 20 grand.
Yeah, I mean, accounting.
Yeah.
Like, how long until that gets taken over? You know, the technique, you'll still need an advisor, but like in terms of doing your BAS, like how long until all that can be done for you by
can't
AI?
wait.
Like, so this is my point. Like, in a world where all that stuff can be done really simply and really, and developing an app, like, you know, instead of having a 10-person team, you might be able to have a 1-person team. Like, in a world where that exists, what is the value?
Yeah.
It's distribution and brand. So I think it's really interesting. And I feel like that's why creator-led businesses are really popular now. But like these worlds of like content and commerce are kind of colliding. And it's really interesting to see how AI is now just like, I think, going to flip it all on its head. And these creator-led businesses are going to be super, you know, they're going to be fast, you know. And that's why I'm interested to talk to you about this. Like, what has been your experiences? Obviously, you've went from, I think with 9 to 5, you guys were probably experimenting a lot with this in like very heavy into content creation. You were probably business first, then adding content creation in and being pretty prominent. Your experience now is like then seeing this massive uplift in your content and kind of just this massive springboard that probably come and caught you out of nowhere, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And like you're now probably this went from creator into business instead of business to creator. So like, what are you seeing on your end? Like, and how can you maybe talk to what that process was for you? Explain to the people listening, okay, what it was like getting sprung into this creator economy.
Sure.
And then what you're experiencing now relaunching into the business world.
Yeah, well, the app is still so much in its infancy. Like there's so long to go with it all. But I think going from creator to business is definitely always the plan. I didn't think I'd have this much of a market to tap into. And it actually made it a little bit hard because you launch an app and like normally when people launch an app, they might have 200 people go into the app. We had 3,000 overnight. So shit, we're testing it straight away, which is good. But then also like you can miss out on little things along the way. So to be honest, right now, actively not paying for marketing, actively not like doing Facebook ads. I just want it to go to the people who see it and want it until we're at a point where I'm super comfortable with it. And then we can like hit it really hard with paid ads and put, 80% of our revenue into paid ads and etc. But yeah, I think like seeing that I had a following and then like going creator to business was like very clear that I needed to be smart with it all and made sure that I wasn't kind of being like a larrikin on social media, but also like making sure because I don't want to do content for the rest of my life. Like I want to be a businessman, not a content creator. So
that's
like,
really interesting.
Yeah. How can you best go about that? And I mean, it was a pretty seamless process, to be honest. And I've always had a dream of like doing what I'm doing now. But I definitely see like the 5-year plan and keep wanting to go back to that 5-year plan.
So you've obviously got a big personal brand now. That's come from on the back of you building your following as, you were kind of sprung into that world of running accidentally. Yeah. Right. But like, I'm interested to feel, because you just kind of mentioned something that's really interesting to me, this thing that like you want to be a businessman. What do you mean by that? Like, and I guess like my kind of follow-up question to that would be like, you said you didn't want to create content forever. Like, what I'm interested in is I'm kind of playing this off in my head at the moment of like personal brand being so powerful. And I feel like you need to have that personality associated with the brand. Like, I'll give you an example. Toby Pierce and Kayla Itzines built Sweat. They rebranded Sweat to Sweat, to this app. And then it got taken over and bought by a company at the absolute peak of COVID. Zerp, they got like a crazy valuation for it. And they just bought it back.
Yeah, for nothing.
Pennies on the dollar compared to what they sold it for. So like I'm running through my head and I feel like that is really interesting. And this idea that like a creator-led business, I would say that's a Kayla Itzines business. That's probably early days, but like this idea that like I feel like these apps don't necessarily work as well without that kind of personal brand at the front.
Yeah.
At the front. So like I'd be really interested to hear your take on it. Is that what you're thinking? Like you want to de-brand away from that, or you still want to be the face? Do you want to kind of get a team in place that can take care of a lot of the content for you? Do you want to diversify the content? Sam Wood's another good example. I think he's still very much involved in his and very much that facing the public. Like, how are you thinking about it? Because that was a really interesting comment for me.
I think the creation of Interval was so much around like building a genuine tool for running. Like, forget about who's in front of it. Like, forget about who the face is. Like, building this app is almost for me. Like, I want an app that I can use for running, programming, telling me exactly what I need to do. It needs to be bite-sized, palatable information that anyone can consume. So imagine you have a product so good that you don't need the face. Or imagine you have a product so good that you don't need someone with X amount of followers to promote it. Like, it's word of mouth, it's et cetera, et cetera. Like, people are just getting on it because they love the product. That's absolutely the goal for Interval. Now, I'm happy to be the face of it. Like, I'm happy to do content. And if it means we're getting more people onto the app, I will continue to do that. But I think the end goal is absolutely to kind of not necessarily pull myself away from the face of it, like happy to do it, but I don't want to be making TikToks when I'm 50.
Mate, I think like you make a really good point. Like what it sounds like you're saying is like, I feel like a lot of people get into the app space and they end up just with like an app that is around content.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's no actual functional value to it. Whereas like what you've built obviously there's a function to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's such a good point. And I think it's good what you're saying is like, you're not just trying to build something where it's like just an extension of your content, where it's like a little bit more content behind a paywall. Like you're trying to build a product that actually has functional value. And you know, for you, it's like potentially an exit at some point.
Yeah, sure. Like,
you know, whatever
it looks like. And we haven't built it with like an exit necessarily in mind. Like you're always prepared for that, I suppose. But I think also like we had the app idea and then the app came. We didn't have like, I want to be an app owner, and then like we built an app around wanting to be an app owner. And I think that's really important in business. Like I think you see a lot of people, tech startup founders or whatever, like see, oh, I want to be a tech startup founder. What can I do to just get me into that space? And then the idea kind of sucks. It will flop over 5 years after they get a bit of investment, and then it eventually fizzles. Like the big thing for Interval is like tool, like this is something I will use and I will personally use. And then we can bring, like how can we best get it on into people's hands? Well, that's an app. Like doing 9 to 5 Fitness and selling programs, we're selling PDFs. And that is not the most premium experience, if you ask me, getting an email and then like scrolling through the page. Like I want a premium experience that is a genuine tool and has community and like content and everything involved.
I think that's the benefit that creator-led businesses have though. Like the big insight for me probably 4 years ago was like, previously how you built a business was like, who could my audience be, or who could my target market be? What are their problems? Creators have this advantage of like, they've already got an audience.
Yeah.
And they're so engaged that you know them so well that you know their problems. And then instead of having a product in mind first and then trying to find an audience to serve for that product to fix their problem, it's the opposite. You kind of build this product based on the problem that you already know exists. And I think that is kind of the springboard that these creator-led businesses have, like that you've already got an audience there. And that's why you probably get this acceleration in like the ability to grow the business. Like you said, you had 3,000 people.
Yeah, which is good and bad though, because you have such access to like such a large pool of people. And then, you know, as I said before, it's like, well, hang on, we might not actually be that ready for that many people. So it's like that access is nice and you're ready to go. But at the same account, like we need to every time we release an update or we put something new onto the app, we're like triple checking it, like obviously, to make sure it's good for the masses. Because you don't know. I could do one TikTok and it just naturally hit an algorithm and we could have 1,000 people on the app tomorrow.
What was your thought process, right? So you have an audience. And how did you decide on the fact that you knew you wanted it to be an app? Like, why wasn't it e-com? Why wasn't it making your own shoe? Like, they're obviously pretty wild ideas, you know, but like, how did you come to this kind of point of like, cool, I've got an audience now. I know that I want to, you know, build a business around this audience. Like, how did you come to the app as the idea?
I think, look, I mean, it started over a year ago in terms of like just peppering the audience. I was handing out free programs, so I wasn't charging you for anything, just giving, because I was getting so many questions about running and just handing out free programming so that they could go in, sign up, you get a whole free program and they go, oh, Louis Phillips, he's actually pretty trustworthy and like he's a pretty good guy. And then I just retained their following. And then eventually like, I was like, all right, programming, like how can we turn it into a more premium experience? Obviously an app, it's not like revolutionary, but I find like beginner programming and it not being intimidating in the running sphere is pretty revolutionary. Like you look at any of the other apps, they're scary, like they are, my mum trying to get involved, it's like just way out of the realm for things, you know? So got mum in mind.
If mum understands it, everyone understands.
That's the barometer. So like right now, for example, like try the process of getting the run from your watch onto the app, super easy for me. Mum cannot figure it out for the life of her, that means it's not okay. Like it's okay for now, and we're working in a way to make it the most simple, seamless process possible. But that's a barometer. And naturally for me, I'm like, how can you not figure this out? But fact of the matter is she can't figure it out. So we have to figure out another way to go about it. But in terms of like why an app? I mean, it's just the ease of and the product, and like it's the best way to get it into different people's hands. So
you tested with those programs first, right? Like those emails, as much as they were probably just emails or like whatever, however you were distributing them, like I'm sure that you probably would have got some feedback and there would have been good test cases there to like understand.
And so also just like for full transparency, I don't make the programming. I'm not a sports and exercise scientist. Like we've got Josh, the sports and exercise scientist, who is the head coach of Interval, and he does all the programming for Interval. So it's all like boxes ticked and it's all very safe. And he helped me with that original programming, a year ago, which we were giving away for free. So that's helped us along the way. But yeah, it's been a kind of year-long process in terms of building trust, and then we're ready to go. Anyone who follows me would know, like, I don't push sales of Interval at all. Like, I'll go for a run, and every time I run, I'll put up like a square from the app, which is showing how many Ks I ran. So instead of doing a Strava one, I'm just doing an Interval one. There's not much difference there. And that's very much intentional that I'm not promoting it hard. Like, I don't want to be pushing the sale too much. I don't want to be like trying to get the masses on just for the sake of making money. Like, we see this as I said before, a 5-10 year plan, a 100-year plan. Like, early beginnings, as long as Hess and I, who's my developer, can pay rent and we can eat, we're good. We'll bootleg it. Like, we'll live in a shack if we have to for the next 5 years, but we just want to build slowly. And I've seen it with my social following, like blowing up really quick. It's actually not that great. Like, it's great, but it comes with its costs. And I think for business, it can really kill a business, like trying to grow too fast. And we're like super aware of that. And we're going to make sure that we are, growing at a rate that's very manageable.
That's counterintuitive though, right? So why is growing too quickly a negative? Or what are the costs associated that you're talking about? Because I'm pretty sure if you asked anyone who listening to this, if they could have 200,000 followers tomorrow, they would take it. So what do you mean? What are those costs?
Well, let's starting with the app. So I don't know what the percentage is, but like you pretty much have one shot with people with an app. Like, Kyle will download Interval once, and if he doesn't like it, delete it. Now, is Interval at its 100% point where I'm like, we will retain every customer? God, no, not even close. I'm really happy with the product, and everyone who goes onto it speaks really highly of it. But if I just completely push my hardest to 200,000 people and they all jump on it, I've kind of burnt it. Like, you don't have much more chance later. Yeah. So the thing is, like, just peppering that run. Like, the people who are on there, most of them are on yearly subscriptions, so they've bought in straight away. And mate, my goal is to remunerate them because like they've put so much trust into me and the team.
They're like your 1,000 loyal fans.
Yeah, like the GOATs. Like, thank you for trusting me. Now, from a content perspective, like something I've definitely experienced, like you get pigeonholed. So grow into running, straight up, 200,000 followers in a month or two. Great, feels really good at the time. It's a pretty lonely couple of months after that when it's winter, no one's running, like you're starting to fall off a little bit. 14-year-olds,
engagement's going down.
14-year-olds in your comments reminding you're losing followers. Like, that's a pretty noisy, that's a noisy time to be alive. So that fast growth is fun at the time, but then you're sacrificing engagement. Like, you've been pigeonholed. If you do anything other than run, like, you get unfollowed. So I don't know. It's an interesting one. If I had my time again, like, I wouldn't change anything, but I'd probably want, like, instead of going 200,000 followers in 2 months.
Just give me 10K a month or something.
Yeah, 10K a month, just like incrementally grow and like they grow with you, but we can't all have it like that.
Tell me about social, because you were someone who, the way I kind of followed your journey, you were like so consistent, like putting in the hard yards, looked at it as a process. I think you've looked at it as a process for a very long time. And that probably is what makes you such a great creator. Tell me about your philosophies on content and what potentially people can learn from that. Because just so that people know, like, you obviously with 9 to 5, like Gab actually had a much bigger following than you in the early days, right?
Yeah.
And I remember like watching you over time, and you were still very, very consistent, very, very much process orientated. And then, you know, it happened. It's like that overnight success thing. Like you'd probably been creating content for like 2-3 years, consistently every week, and then, you know, very quickly life changed. So tell me like your philosophies on content. What, you know, how do you look at it? And then we might even go a little bit more detailed than that. Like, how do you structure your week around content? Because I feel like that's a really big one.
For sure. So content-wise, I think business-wise as well for me, content creators are nutcases generally. Like, they are the most unhinged, like, see the shiny thing, do it. So it's like, where's the views? Where's the... And you just chase the whole time. What I think I've been really good at is just being, like, never as bad as you think it is, never as good as you think it is. And I've just always remained at that kind of neutral, which is pretty boring for a lot of people. But like, I don't need to be like full grind set, no drinking, no partying, stay home, stay in your room, like to get followers. And I feel like that's kind of a big buzz in the world of social media is like, you have to go really hard for a couple months and then you pull back. I've literally just done the same shit for the last 3 years. And it just started getting recognized. And you said that kind of like the overnight success thing. It's like I blew up overnight, essentially over a month or two. But the 3 years that I was doing where I had 10,000 followers had prepared me for that time that first video blew up. So the second it blew up, I knew exactly what I needed to do, exactly what I needed to implement to keep growing.
Because you did do that and you learnt pretty quickly. Like I remember you obviously had that one big video, but then like you actually hit some big views for the next view as well. And you kind of, you could see that you learnt quickly. And you're right. Like, you know, looking back on it now, like it feels like if you had, like, let's say you blew up overnight. Yeah. And like maybe you had only been creating content for what? A month or even 6 months. Like you may not have known how to replicate that skill or replicate 100%. That content to be able to keep driving that growth.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that mindset of just being like so neutral with things, like just constantly. So, you know, I went through a stage, I went on a fucking reality TV show. Wouldn't recommend doing that. And it just butchered my following. And like, so it's going down and I've got people in my ear, oh, you're losing, like you're falling off, like what are you going to do? What are you going to do? So no, I'll be all right. Like I know exactly what I need to do. Sure enough, summer comes around, same kind of videos, tick, 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 and it all just comes back.
It's a brand equity thing too, right? Like I would assume, I mean, I haven't built a following like yours. I built a podcast, but not a following, right? So like, and it's probably come from my inconsistency with my own content, but like I feel like what you just said would be a really key message for like brand equity. Like don't chase everything. Cause like one thing I realize or recognize with creators is like when somebody's shilling a different thing to me every month, like 1 month they're like, you know, this fucking keto drink's really, really good. And then the next month they're selling like
vegan
carb drink, right? Like it's like or like whatever, right? Like it's like you're like, hang on a second, what the fuck's going on here? So like this idea that like you know, brand equities, like someone that I look up to talks about this the key term influence, and influence is this idea that like when you say to do something, people do it, and it's like that brand equity piece. Like I think about like Michael Jordan, like you know. He obviously had one amazing deal, probably the greatest deal of all time for his whole career, but like he never really just like sold anything. And so like that's why like you have this such a tie to like
so when he sells,
Nike, right? Like Nike, Michael Jordan. You're like I wear Nikes because of Michael, right? That is influence. But like I feel like the biggest mistake a creator can make from someone who probably purchases from creators is like when they're just selling fucking everything. And you're like, man, I don't even know what
what are you doing?
No, it's confusing
sold
me.
out.
I'm done.
Yeah.
You
and
know?
I've done that as well, like for sure. Like this is the shiny thing, I suppose. But I think that just like the steadfast, you know, just that you'll always get the running tips and you'll come back, you know what you're getting, and it always works out. And then also like looking at it like a real business. And, you know, humans, and throughout the week, we go through so many ups and downs. Like, that's okay. You can be, you know, transparent in your content, but at the same time, like, you don't need to see every up, you don't need to see every down. Like, just keep it neutral and just keep ticking away. From like a specific perspective, my content has been very like, I've done this 70-30 split. So 70% of my videos set to casting in net and trying to gain new followers. So that's doing like, you know, how to run further for longer, how to run faster, longer, etc. Like really basic. Zone 2, it's like the same video you probably see of me. The thing I say 10 times, but 10 different ways. So, you know, it's the same message said 10 different ways. That's 70% of my content's gaining new followers. And then 30% is about retaining followers and improving engagement. That's like the sub 40-minute 10K runs and like trying to do an ultra marathon. That kind of stuff is what keeps people around. So sticking with that process has been really just like good to go back to. It's like just the drawing board. And, you know, when shit goes crazy and when it's going up, like, yeah, it's all right, but it won't be like this next week. So don't get too hyped about it. And when things are going through the floor, well, like, it'll be fine next week. You know, like just sticking with that. And it's from what I've found in all the creators I've met, it is so rare to see. Like, they are so unhinged, and like there's 4 different businesses. There's, you know, we're building this now. It's a new this, and there's a new product, and it's like, mate, I'm tired from just looking at your profile for one day.
Yeah. Double click on 70-30 split. That the wide net versus. I found that when you said that, I'm like, oh, I know what he's talking about there. Like I kind of, you know, have seen that before, but it didn't end up being what I thought it would. So 70% is that broad topic because I'm guessing
it's that message
broadness brings in new audience, correct? Yeah. Like it's that like
no, it's not even broad. I think you can be quite specific with it, but it needs to be like what are you fixing with that message? So for me, everyone hates running. I'm making a video saying running shouldn't suck. This is how to make it not suck. Follow me. You know, this is how to run 5Ks. Oh, this is how to enjoy running 5 kilometers. Might be my hook. Okay, people are watching now. And generally, who's going to watch that? Beginners. So not professional runners.
And there's a lot more beginners than there is professionals.
So this is
how
to
run. That's what I meant, but that broadness is like the audience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then so this is how, and then like aerobic base, run slowly, and so you enjoy it. Like that's really tasty to someone. Like, hang on, I don't have to flog myself. And like within that, I'll say, you know, if you need to walk, that's okay. So it's like allowing them this like kind of almost get out of jail thing. And then at the end saying follow if you want more tips.
And then the 30%, so you were talking about like, this is like I'm doing
like
an ultra.
Stuff. Yeah.
It's like, that's kind of like the entertainment
side of
it,
that's
right?
reality TV. Like I want to see him snap a leg doing an ultra. Like great content, you know, like that's going to keep them watching. I've got an ultra in May. Like, what is it? It's March now. They're going to keep watching until May to see if I do it.
That's so interesting.
Hopefully.
I actually haven't really heard anyone talk about
it. You
can
apply it to anything. Like let's say if you want to start cooking, like this is how to cook the best curry. You know, it might be the 70%, but then the 30% is like, you know,
the hottest eating challenge.
Yeah, the hottest eating challenge. Exactly. Like just this like really specific, crazy thing that people don't want to do, but they want to consume it. And like, God, it kind of sucks because I feel like you're adding to society's like issues of being on their phone and being sucked in all the time.
No, but it's the game.
But like, it's the bloody game, isn't it?
Yeah, fuck, that's super interesting. Mate, that's awesome. I feel like that's a really key insight for people when it comes to I learned something there, so that's great. We're going to jump into quick fire.
Sure.
You take it wherever you want to go. One piece of advice for your younger self.
I think it's just belief. Comes down to belief. As a student, as like a kid, a lot of issues, ADHD, auditory processing. I was not good in school. I was doubting myself all the way through. I'd come home, say to mum and dad, I'm dumb. I'm so dumb. I'm an idiot. So, and I wasn't an idiot. I just learnt differently. And mum and dad would say that to me. You're like, you just learn differently. And I think that lack of belief has affected me in the past. Luckily, I've got the best friends, best family, best girlfriend everyone believes in me now. So there's no issues in that regard. But I think I'd tell myself to have more belief, and yeah, you're not an idiot.
I love that. I think it's great. Definitely great advice. I think because at some point, overcoming that lack of confidence is pivotal to achieving whatever you want. Because like, I think a lot of the time you're trying to build this base of work underneath you that's how you build the confidence. But you can't do that all the time, because that's that is grinding against like the wall. Like it's like just grinding through everything, but eventually you have to let go of that.
Yeah,
and take that next step.
Let it go and believe in yourself. Yeah, it's such a funny one. Like, mate, I was lucky enough. My school actually invited me back to do a chat just at lunchtime to a group of kids and like in a careers thing, and it was like totally my message. Like, I was sitting there once, but I genuinely thought almost nothing of myself, and it's like, just because maybe the school or like, you know, your peers are going and doing accounting or whatever, you're not an idiot for that. Like, it's okay. You will find your way. And I think that would have helped me a lot if I heard that when I was that age.
Funny story. I've got a daughter now. She's 8 months old.
Congratulations.
And it's very interesting that you say that and the way you talked about it. Matt McConaughey has written a book called Just Because. And it basically is, just because someone said that about you doesn't mean it's true. And it's very a play on words, but it's very much down the line of what you just said. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, isn't it?
One piece of advice for someone who's thinking of starting a business.
Do it. Like, I know it's so cliche, but what's the alternative? Like, if you go your whole life going, oh, if I started that business, like if I came up with that thing called AI, well, yeah, if you did, it might have, but we don't know. So I think just do it. And especially if you're young, like if you're a young person, there is never a better time than now. Like, yeah, you want to get your bread up, you want to get a bit of cash behind you. To be honest, pretty much started Interval with bugger all money and just like have just willed it off the ground. And now we're making money, and we're good to go from here. So I think my thing is, particularly for young people, just like bloody do it and get out there and give it a crack. It's the same with content as well. Man, the amount of messages I get from people saying, hey, can we have a meeting about content? And then I'll go do the meeting. I get to go for coffee, or we'll go for a walk around the town or something. It's like, so I've got this idea, here it is. And I'll listen to the idea. Yeah, it's great. And like, but I don't know if I should like upload it. And it's like, you've actually just asked for confirmation from me. And I was like, I don't know what works. Like, this shit's not a science. My videos flop all the time. But at the end of the day, like, all I have to do is tell them to just do it. So instead of messaging that creator to ask for them for help, just listen to this podcast and understand you should post that video and you should post that idea, or you should start at least moving towards it. You know, what's the old saying? How do you eat an elephant? 1 teaspoon at a time. Just get eaten.
It's such good advice. Last one. If you take one thing back, what would it be and why?
Mate, these are good questions. One thing back. Oh, God.
Funny story. I actually got this. I've got a book at the moment that it asks you these questions, and you write to your daughter or son.
Oh.
So, and then you give it to them.
Yeah.
And so you write, it's got everything, but this question's from that. It's a very hard question to answer.
It's a brutal question, isn't it? I think I think a lot of my self-chat in the past has been quite negative, and I think I've been quite harsh on myself, whether it be in regards to learning, whether it be in regards to ability, and it's purely my own fault. Like, it's not anyone around me. But I think I would take back some of the chat I had towards myself, calling myself an idiot, and I've found the more positive I am to my personal chat, the better I perform. Like, in my head, I genuinely have so much belief in myself. Now that's helped by the people around me, but previously I was doing myself such a disservice from the way I talk to myself, or, if I was, let's say for fitness, for example, I used to like, get in there, you prick, fucking run harder. But now if I'm in a marathon in the last 10 Ks, I'm like, come on, mate, we can do this. Like, like positive chat. Let's go. Come on. You know, you've trained for this, et cetera, et cetera. And that applies to business as well. Like instead of, you know, saying, oh, I'm not good enough for this. Like, yeah, you know, just positive chat and consistently kind of reaffirming myself. Honestly, I'm my own best mate. So,
Mate, I think there's a massive positive to that for everybody. If you can get to a point where you are your own best mate, which sounds a little bit weird, but I get it.
Yeah.
I think
I have got mates as well. I'm not like psychotic.
it's a good place to be. It's a good place to be. Lewis, mate, I want to say a massive thank you. I think there's a lot of great insight in there. You know, plenty of you know, great insights and lessons. Thank you for your time, mate. To everyone listening, it's been a little bit of, you know, a little bit of a few breaks in between episodes, but I can't promise that we'll be here every week from here on in, but we will keep doing them. I hope you enjoy the episode, and we'll see you next time.